It was the kind of love that everyone wanted to believe in, the kind you see in movies. Two people, their lives entwined, their hearts bound together in a way that felt destined, written in the stars. Their chemistry was undeniable. She, charismatic, radiant woman, and he, the quiet, introspective man with a heart full of tenderness. On the surface, they were the perfect couple, but just beneath that polished surface, the cracks had already begun to show. Her name was Aisha Walker, a beautiful, poised woman in her early 30s, with rich brown skin that glowed under the sunlight and eyes that seemed to understand the world in ways that others didn't. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and commanded attention, not because she demanded it, but because she exuded an energy that couldn't be ignored. Everyone loved Aisha, her friends, her colleagues, her family. She had it all: career, the charm, the perfect boyfriend. And then there was Jordan McCall, the quiet artist, a man whose emotions ran deep, buried beneath a calm and collected exterior. In the eyes of everyone around him, he was the perfect complement to Aisha, grounding her, balancing her vivacity with his calm demeanor. But only Aisha knew the truth. Only she understood the silent rage that simmered beneath his still surface. Before we begin, like this video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more intriguing stories. Now let's begin. Theirs was a love story that seemed as perfect as it came. Jordan would tell her she was his muse, his everything. He would write her poetry, serenade her with quiet songs in the dimly lit corners of their apartment. They'd cook together, laughing over spilled ingredients and burnt dishes. His devotion to her seemed unshakable, but all that love had its price. Aisha had always felt it, the heavy weight of Jordan's affection, the way he watched her intensely, sometimes too intensely. It was as though he could read her every move, her every thought. But for a while, she shrugged it off. They were in love. Wasn't that what mattered? She told herself it was harmless, until it wasn't. It started with little things, just barely noticeable shifts that made her stomach tighten, like the way he would always call her when she was out with her friends, making sure she wasn't doing anything he wouldn't approve of. The tone of his voice was never loud, never commanding, but there was an underlying tension, like a rope pulled just tight enough to make her nervous. Then came the jealousy, the quiet, simmering jealousy that would show itself in the smallest moments, like when she received a text from a colleague and Jordan would casually ask, "Who's that?" He'd never demand to see the message. No, it was always phrased like a question, but Aisha could feel the weight behind it. He wanted to know. He needed to know. But it wasn't until the incident that Aisha began to truly see the monster lurking behind the man she thought she knew. It happened one evening, during one of their routine dinners together at home. She just finished a long, exhausting day at work, and as usual, Jordan was waiting for her with dinner. She hadn't thought much of it at the time, but as soon as she stepped into the apartment, she felt the atmosphere change. Something was different. "Off. I made your favorite," Jordan said, offering her a warm smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Aisha smiled, grateful for his thoughtfulness, but her gut told her something wasn't right. She sat down at the table, and as she did, she noticed that his hands were trembling slightly as he placed the plates before her. She tried to ignore it, but it gnawed at her. They began to eat in silence, the hum of the city outside filling the room. But then, without warning, Jordan's hand shot out and gripped her wrist tightly. "Who are you with today?" His voice was soft, almost too soft. Aisha froze. She looked up at him, her pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" "Who were you with?" he repeated, his grip tightening slightly. Her mind raced. "I told you. I was just at work with the team. Why are you asking me that?" Jordan didn't answer immediately. He just stared at her, his eyes darkening with an intensity she couldn't quite place. "Aisha, you're mine. I need you to remember that." Her heart skipped a beat. His words, though soft, carried a weight of ownership. They struck a chord deep inside her, one that sent chills down her spine. She had always known Jordan was possessive, but this felt different. This wasn't love, this was control. "Aisha, look at me," Jordan said, his voice low but firm. She hesitated for a moment, trying to make sense of what was happening, before slowly raising her eyes to meet his. The love that had once been there was now tainted, overshadowed by something darker, more suffocating. "I'm sorry, She didn't know how to finish. She wanted to apologize for not realizing sooner, for not seeing the subtle signs of his hidden rage creeping into their relationship. She wanted to apologize for her naivety, but before she could say anything else, Jordan spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Don't make me hurt you, Aisha." A chill ran through her. She wanted to believe it was a joke, that it was some misguided attempt at humor, but deep down, she knew it wasn't. This wasn't a man expressing frustration. This was a man issuing a threat. And in that moment, Aisha realized the truth. Love doesn't threaten. Love doesn't control. Love doesn't suffocate. This wasn't love. This was rage masked in affection. But it was too late for Aisha. She was already trapped. The days after that chilling night felt like a haze to Aisha. She could no longer separate the man she loved from the one she feared. Jordan's tender gestures, his soft words, had become loaded with a dark weight. Every time he kissed her, she wondered if it was out of love or ownership. Every smile he gave her made her question if it was sincere or a way to keep her docile, to keep her in line. She had been drowning in his love, but now she was suffocating. For the first time in her life, Aisha found herself looking for escape, searching for signs of her own autonomy. She thought back to the early days of their relationship, how she had felt free, how she had felt seen and heard. But now, it was as if she was being watched under a magnifying glass, his eyes ever present, dissecting every move, every word. He had become obsessed with controlling the smallest details of her life. She started spending more time at work, staying late to avoid facing him. She buried herself in her projects, in meetings, and in the hum of the office. At least there, she could breathe. But Jordan noticed. He began to call more often, leaving voicemails if she didn't pick up. "Are you ignoring me, Aisha?" the messages would say, his tone casual but with an edge. "Why are you avoiding me? You know I only want what's best for you." She could feel the control tightening around her, but she had no idea how to break free. His manipulation was so subtle, so insidious, that it felt like she was the one losing her mind. One evening, as she returned home from work, Aisha walked into an atmosphere so thick with tension, she could barely breathe. The apartment was dark, save for the glow of the dimmed kitchen lights. Jordan was standing by the window, his back to her, a glass of whiskey in his hand. "I thought you weren't coming home tonight," he said without turning around. Aisha felt the familiar knot of anxiety form in her stomach. She forced a smile, trying to keep her voice steady. "I told you, I was finishing up some work. You know how it is." Jordan didn't respond, but the silence between them was deafening. Aisha took a few steps toward the kitchen, her heart hammering in her chest. She knew that something was wrong. She could feel it in the air. "You know, Aisha," Jordan finally said, his voice low and calm. "I've been thinking about us." Aisha froze in place. The way he said it, with that eerie calmness, sent a wave of dread through her. She braced herself for whatever was coming next. "I've been thinking about how much I've done for you," Jordan continued, turning to face her. "How I've given you everything. And yet, you still seem to be slipping away from me. Why is that?" Aisha didn't know how to answer. She wanted to tell him that he was suffocating her, that his love wasn't love at all, but she was terrified of what would happen if she spoke those words aloud. Instead, she said nothing. Jordan took a slow, deliberate step toward her, his eyes never leaving hers. His gaze was intense, unsettling. "You can't keep running away from me, Aisha," he murmured. "You're mine, remember?" The last words were almost a whisper, but they were loud enough to ring in Aisha's ears. "You're mine." She wanted to argue, to fight back, but something in her instinctively told her that now wasn't the time. Jordan's grip on reality was slipping, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could stay afloat in this relationship. The next day, Aisha made a plan. She wasn't sure how, but she had to get out. She had to escape from the prison Jordan had built around her. So, she started looking for places to stay, friends, family, Anywhere she could go to feel safe, even if only for a few days. But Jordan was always there, watching, listening. He was becoming more unpredictable, more volatile, and Aisha knew that her time was running out. That evening, when she came home late from work, she found Jordan sitting on the couch, waiting for her. The apartment was unnervingly quiet, the silence hanging between them like a thick fog. "I know what you've been doing," Jordan said, his voice tight with barely contained rage. Aisha's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I know you've been looking for a way out," he said, standing up slowly, his eyes narrowing. "But you can't escape me. You think you can hide from me, but I always know where you are. I'm always watching." The words were like cold water splashing over Aisha's skin, but her fear hadn't yet turned into panic. She had heard it before, the veiled threats, the cold warnings, but this time it felt different. This time, there was no hiding from the truth. "I love you," Jordan continued, his voice softening, "and I'm doing this because I love you." But Aisha knew, deep down, that this wasn't love. This was control. This was rage disguised as affection. The final realization hit her like a slap. Jordan's love wasn't a love at all. It was a twisted, suffocating need. He didn't want a partner. He didn't want love. He wanted ownership. And Aisha had been his prisoner from the start. Aisha's hands trembled as she backed away from Jordan, her mind racing for a way out. The room felt smaller, suffocating, as though the walls themselves were closing in. She had nowhere to run. The fear had already set in, and she could feel the weight of it pressing down on her chest. But something within her shifted. A quiet resolve began to grow. She couldn't keep living like this. Not anymore. But as she made a move to leave, Jordan stepped forward, blocking her way. His voice was calm, but the anger in his eyes spoke volumes. "I'm not done with you, Aisha. Not by a long shot." Aisha couldn't breathe. Each step she took felt like wading through thick mud. She had been living under Jordan's shadow for so long, but now, the suffocating weight of his presence felt unbearable. The walls of the apartment, once a place of comfort, now seemed like the bars of a cage. She had to leave. But where? Her mind raced as she tried to plan, to think, to strategize a way to break free from his iron grip. But every corner she turned, Jordan was there, hovering, watching, waiting. For the first time, Aisha began to understand the depth of her entrapment. It was one thing to love someone, to be in a relationship with them, but it was entirely another when their affection turned into a relentless obsession. The control, the manipulation, everything that had felt subtle and gradual before now seemed so obvious, so glaringly wrong. But how had she allowed it to go this far? Her mind flashed back to the beginning, when everything had seemed perfect. Jordan had been everything she'd wanted in a partner. Thoughtful, attentive, caring. At first, his need for closeness had felt like a sign of love, but over time, it had morphed into something darker, something she had been too afraid to recognize. Aisha sat down on the couch, her hands trembling. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced at the screen. An incoming text from Jordan. "Where are you? I miss you." The words made her stomach churn. She could hear his voice in her head, soft and pleading, trying to manipulate her, trying to make her feel guilty for needing space, trying to make her feel responsible for his happiness. How did I let this happen? She stood up quickly, pacing the room, trying to breathe, trying to think. She grabbed her phone, typing out a response, but her fingers hesitated over the keys. What could she say? What could she possibly tell him that would make him leave her alone? Her thumb hovered over the send button, and then she saw it. A missed call from her best friend, Tasha. Aisha quickly dialed the number, her heart racing. The phone rang twice before Tasha picked up. "Aisha, what's going on?" Tasha's voice was sharp, concerned. "You've been distant. I've been trying to reach you all day." I need your help." Aisha's voice cracked, fear evident in every syllable. "Jordan, he's not letting me go. He's controlling me, Tasha. He's not who I thought he was." The words spilled out, a tidal wave of panic and disbelief. She could feel her breath quicken. the walls closing in once again as she spoke. Tasha's voice was calm, but Aisha could hear the underlying panic in her tone. "Listen to me, Aisha," Tasha said, her voice firm. "You need to get out of there. You're not safe. Don't wait too long." Aisha's throat tightened as she looked around the apartment. The place that once felt like home now seemed foreign, hostile, a prison. I can't just leave. What if he comes after me? What if he... Sure, Tasha interrupted. "You need to get out, Aisha. Now." Aisha wiped away the tear that slipped down her cheek. She hadn't even realized she was crying. Okay, I'll pack some things, and I'll come over. But Tasha, I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. I don't know how much longer I can pretend this is love." Tasha's voice softened, but there was an edge to it. "You don't have to pretend anymore. We'll get you out. I'm on my way. Just stay strong, okay?" Aisha hung up the phone, her hands shaking as she dropped it onto the table. She felt numb. Her heart was racing, but her body felt like it was moving through molasses. She had made the decision. She was going to leave. She was going to escape the hell she'd been trapped in. But just as she turned to head to her bedroom to pack, the door slammed open behind her. "Aisha," Jordan's voice called, low and demanding, his presence filling the room. "Where do you think you're going?" Her heart skipped a beat. She froze, panic bubbling up from the depths of her chest. She turned slowly, her body betraying her with the unmistakable tremor in her hands. Jordan stood there, eyes wide with fury, his body rigid with anger. The door had been open only a crack, but he was already inside, blocking her escape. Aisha's chest tightened, the air around her suffocating. "You thought you could just leave?" He spat, his voice low, dangerous. "I gave you everything, Aisha. Everything. And now you want to walk away?" Aisha's pulse raced, every instinct telling her to run, to get away, to hide. But her legs felt like lead, her feet glued to the ground. I need some space, Jordan," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm suffocating in here." "Space." Jordan's laugh was bitter, cold. "You want space? You don't need space. You need me. I'm the only one who cares about you. I'm the only one who sees you." Aisha's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't the man she'd fallen in love with. This was someone else entirely. Someone she didn't recognize. "Please, Jordan," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Just let me go." But Jordan's face twisted into something dark, something ugly. "You're mine, Aisha. You always will be. You don't get to walk away from me." Before she could respond, Jordan took a step forward, his hand grabbing her arm with an iron grip. The pain was immediate, sharp, as his fingers dug into her skin. "Don't you ever try to leave me again," he growled, his breath hot against her neck. Aisha's heart pounded, and everything in her screamed to fight back, to break free. But it felt like she was frozen, trapped in a nightmare with no way out. In that moment, something inside her broke. She knew she couldn't keep living this way. She couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. She couldn't let Jordan control her any longer. "I'm leaving, Jordan," Aisha said, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling in her chest. "And if you try to stop me, I'll go anyway." For the first time, she saw a flicker of something unfamiliar in his eyes. Was it fear? Regret? Or was it just rage building up inside him? He didn't say anything. He just stood there, gripping her arm tightly, as if willing her to submit, to give in to his control. But Aisha was done. The first crack had appeared in the facade, and there was no going back. Aisha's heart raced as she wrenched herself free from Jordan's grip, her legs moving instinctively toward the door. But before she could make it, Jordan stepped forward and slammed the door shut with a violent force. His eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time, Aisha saw it, the true depth of his rage. "You really think you can leave me?" he said, his voice dangerously calm. "You really think you have a choice?" Aisha's body trembled with adrenaline, her breath shallow and panicked as she faced Jordan. The man she thought she knew was slipping further and further away from her, transforming into something she no longer recognized. He stood in front of the door now, his posture rigid, blocking her only escape route. His eyes, those once loving eyes, were filled with something colder, something darker. Fear surged through her veins, but it wasn't just fear of him. It was fear of the woman she had become, the woman who had allowed herself to be manipulated, controlled, and twisted by this toxic love. A woman who had stayed too long, ignored too many warning signs, and now had no idea how to escape the web she was trapped in. You think you can just walk away, don't you? Jordan's voice was deceptively calm, but the undercurrent of fury was impossible to ignore. He stepped forward slowly, his movements deliberate, like a predator cornering its prey. Aisha's heart slammed against her chest as she backed up, feeling the heat of his presence pushing her against the wall. His hand shot out, gripping her arm once again, this time more forcefully, his nails digging into her skin. "I did everything for you, Aisha," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "I gave you my heart, my soul, and you repay me by throwing it away." His words felt like daggers, each one sinking deeper into her resolve. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. What could she say? How could she explain to him that this wasn't love? That she didn't want his heart if it came with this kind of control, this suffocating obsession? She tried to yank her arm free, but he only tightened his grip, his face twisting with anger. "I'm the only one who's ever truly cared for you. I'm the one who's always been there. And you're just going to leave me like this?" Aisha's eyes darted to the door again, the only thing standing between her and freedom. But she knew it wasn't that simple. Jordan's grip on her life, on her mind, was too strong. It was as if he had woven a net around her that she couldn't escape, no matter how hard she tried. "I'm not leaving you, Jordan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, her throat tight with emotion. "I'm leaving this control." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For a moment, there was silence between them. Jordan's eyes flickered with something that almost resembled doubt. Aisha took advantage of the brief pause and pulled away from him, finally wrenching her arm free from his iron grip. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she might have a chance to run. But Jordan's eyes narrowed, and the doubt in his expression quickly morphed into something darker, something far more dangerous. "You think you can just leave me?" he repeated, his voice steady, almost too steady. "You think you can just walk out the door like I don't exist? Like you can erase me from your life?" Aisha's breath caught in her throat as she stepped backward, her mind scrambling for a plan. She had to get away. She had to find a way out of this nightmare. But before she could move, Jordan's voice cut through the air like a whip. "I won't let you leave, Aisha. Not without consequences." His words sent a chill down her spine. There was no more hiding the truth now. His possessiveness, his rage, it was no longer a hidden part of him. It was out in the open, and it was terrifying. Aisha could see it in his eyes now, the rage that had been simmering beneath the surface all along. It wasn't love. It wasn't affection. It was a need to control, to dominate, to make her bend to his will. And now, she had pushed him too far. He took a step toward her, and her heart leapt into her throat. "You think you can just walk away from me?" he repeated, his voice now rising, his composure slipping. "You're mine, Aisha. Don't you ever forget that." Aisha knew in that moment that Jordan wasn't the man she had fallen in love with. That man was gone, replaced by someone unrecognizable, someone dangerous. She had stayed too long, let things go too far, and now there was no turning back. But as the terror began to flood her body, something inside her shifted. A quiet strength, born from desperation, began to rise within her. She had spent so long making excuses, telling herself that things would get better, that Jordan would change, that he loved her enough to stop. But she knew now that she couldn't keep lying to herself. She had to get out. There was no other choice. "You're not my God, Jordan," Aisha said, her voice steady but defiant. "And I am not your property." For a split second, Jordan froze. The words hit him harder than anything she had ever said. And in that moment, Aisha saw the true depth of his insecurity, of the darkness he was hiding. But before she could take another step toward the door, his hand shot out, gripping her arm again, this time with an urgency that was almost frantic. "Don't you dare walk out that door," he warned, his voice low and shaking with fury. Aisha pulled her arm from his grasp, her voice rising with determination. "You don't get to control me anymore, Jordan." With one final surge of adrenaline, Aisha darted toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest. But before she could reach the knob, Jordan was on her, grabbing her by the shoulders, spinning her around to face him. "Don't leave me, Aisha," he whispered harshly, his face mere inches from hers, his breath hot on her skin. "I will never let you go." In his eyes she saw it, raw, unhinged emotion, his love, twisted into something monstrous. And in that moment, she realized just how far gone he really was. Aisha's heart raced, and she knew that if she didn't leave now, she might never get the chance to again. She shoved him away with all her strength, finally breaking free from his grip. The door was right there. She had one chance. Without a second thought, she grabbed the doorknob and yanked it open, running into the hallway, her legs carrying her faster than she'd ever run in her life. But as she turned the corner, she heard him calling her name, louder, more frantic now. "Aisha." But she didn't stop. Not this time. She couldn't. She was almost out. She could see the exit, the freedom she had been craving for so long, just within her reach. But then, the sound of footsteps, heavy, pounding, relentless, echoed behind her. She wasn't alone, and she knew, without a doubt, that Jordan wasn't going to let her go easily. Aisha's pulse roared in her ears as she bolted down the stairwell, her heart pounding with every step. She could hear Jordan's footsteps behind her, pounding in relentless pursuit, each one a reminder that she wasn't free yet. Her mind raced, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps, but all she could focus on was getting out of the building. She had to keep running. She had no choice. As she reached the ground floor, Aisha pushed through the building's entrance, the cool night air slapping her face. Her body burned with the effort of running, but the terror driving her forward kept her feet moving. She darted across the sidewalk, weaving through the early evening crowd, her eyes darting from side to side, searching for an escape. The streets, once familiar and comforting, now felt like a maze, a labyrinth of shadows that she couldn't escape. She had been in this neighborhood for years, but now every corner felt like a dead end, every passerby a potential threat. Was someone following her? Was Jordan still there, just waiting for her to slip up? Aisha's thoughts spiraled. She knew she couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later, Jordan would catch up to her. She needed to find help. She needed to disappear, to get out of the toxic grip of the man who had once been her world. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed Tasha's number. "Please pick up. Please pick up," she muttered under her breath, her eyes scanning the street frantically. The phone rang twice before Tasha's voice crackled through the speaker. "Aisha, are you okay? Where are you?" I'm on Oak Street," Aisha gasped, trying to keep her voice steady. "Jordan, he's after me. I don't know how much longer I can keep running. Please, Tasha, I need you to get here now." Okay, just stay calm. I'm coming, Aisha. Don't stop running. I'll find you." Aisha exhaled in relief, but the feeling was short-lived. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she heard the familiar sound of footsteps. Her stomach dropped, and a cold wave of dread washed over her. He was close. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she glanced over her shoulder, her breath catching in her throat. Jordan was there. His figure was just visible at the far end of the block, his eyes fixed on her, his pace steady but determined. He was gaining on her. No. Aisha. Her name rang out through the night, his voice low, desperate, and filled with something that was almost a snarl. Aisha's breath caught in her throat. She pushed herself harder, her legs screaming with exertion as she cut across the street without looking. The city lights blurred around her, but her only focus was on getting away, on getting to safety. She spotted an alleyway ahead, its shadows deep and hiding, offering the smallest sliver of sanctuary. She turned sharply, ducking into the alley, hoping the darkness would shield her from Jordan's sight. She pressed her back against the brick wall, the coldness of it seeping through her clothes as she tried to catch her breath. For a brief moment, everything felt still, and the chaos in her mind began to quiet. But then, the sound of heavy breathing echoed from the mouth of the alley. Jordan had followed her. "You can't hide from me, Aisha," he shouted, his voice jagged with emotion. "You're mine. You'll always be mine." Aisha swallowed hard, her throat dry with fear. She had nowhere left to run. She was trapped, with nowhere to go and no one to help her. Her phone was still pressed to her ear, but she could barely hear Tasha through the panic rising in her chest. I don't want this anymore, Jordan," Aisha choked out, her voice cracking. "This isn't love. This is obsession. You've twisted everything." There was a long, agonizing pause. The sound of Jordan's breathing was heavy and uneven, like he was struggling to hold it together. Aisha's eyes stung as she blinked rapidly, tears blurring her vision. She could hear Tasha's voice in the background of the phone, trying to get through to her, but it felt like nothing could reach her. Jordan was closing in. He was right there. "You can't leave me, Aisha," Jordan said, his voice cold now, devoid of the warmth it once held. "You belong to me. I gave you everything. I did everything for you." Aisha's heart twisted with a deep, aching sadness. She wanted to reach out to him, to remind him of the man he used to be, the man who had once made her feel safe, cherished. But that man was gone. The man standing before her now was a stranger, a monster. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "You gave me nothing but fear, Jordan. You've suffocated me. You've made me feel like I'm not good enough, like I'm nothing without you. I won't let you do this to me anymore." Aisha felt a surge of courage rising within her. She could feel the weight of every word she'd kept inside for so long, every moment of silence, every sacrifice, finally coming to the surface. "I am enough," she said, her voice rising with newfound strength. "And I'm not yours anymore." Jordan's face twisted into a snarl, his hands clenching at his sides. He took a step forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You're not leaving me, Aisha," he said, his words like poison. "You think you can just walk away from everything I've done for you? Everything I've sacrificed?" But Aisha didn't back down. She stood her ground, her chest heaving with emotion, her hands trembling but resolute. "I'm done. You'll never control me again." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with finality. Aisha knew she had made the right choice. She couldn't let him win. Not now. Not ever. Suddenly, the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, cutting through the tension. Aisha's heart skipped a beat. Help was coming. Jordan's eyes flickered to the end of the alley, and in that instant, he seemed to realize the situation was slipping out of his control. His eyes darted back to Aisha, a storm of emotion swirling in them. "You think you're safe," he spat. "You're nothing without me." Aisha didn't respond. She just took one last, deep breath, knowing that this was the moment everything changed. And then, before Jordan could take another step toward her, the sound of tires screeched to a halt, and a car door slammed. Tasha's voice called out through the alley, clear and unwavering. "Aisha, I'm here." The flashing lights of a squad car illuminated the alley as Tasha appeared from the darkness, a determined look on her face. The officers behind her moved swiftly, their presence a force that seemed to make the very air feel safer. Jordan's face contorted with rage, but for the first time, Aisha didn't feel afraid. She felt free. But just as the officers moved to intervene, Jordan took one last desperate step toward her, his hands raised in fury. "You think you've won," he hissed. "You don't know who I am." The alley was filled with the harsh sounds of the police officers' footsteps as they rushed toward Aisha and Jordan. The flashing lights of the squad car painted the walls in alternating streaks of red and blue. The tension between Aisha and Jordan was palpable, an emotional storm swirling around them, threatening to consume everything in its path. Jordan's eyes burned with a fire that Aisha had seen before, but this time it was different. This time, it wasn't a plea for affection. It wasn't love masquerading as obsession. This was something more dangerous, rage, and an unrelenting need for control. But Aisha didn't feel afraid anymore. She could feel her strength, the power that had been building inside her for weeks now, rising like a tide. She wasn't that helpless woman who had been too scared to speak up. She wasn't the one who had let his manipulations define her. She was someone different now, stronger, and in this moment, she knew that she could never go back. As the officers approached, Jordan took another step toward her. His fists were clenched, his breath coming in quick, uneven bursts. His voice was low but laced with fury. "You really think you've won?" he sneered. "You think that just because you have a couple of cops here, you can take me down? You think you can walk away from me like this? You can't. You'll never be free." Aisha's breath caught for just a moment, but it wasn't out of fear. It was out of disgust. Disgust for the man who had once been her everything, who had twisted everything she had ever known about love into a dark, suffocating nightmare. "You don't control me anymore," Aisha said, her voice clear and unwavering. She wasn't shouting. She didn't need to. The power in her words was enough to silence the storm in her chest. Jordan's face twisted in disbelief. He took another step, his hands raised. "You're nothing without me. Nothing." But Aisha stood her ground. She wasn't the woman she once was. She wasn't his to command. She wasn't his anything. The officers reached them, their presence a wall between Aisha and Jordan. One officer stepped in front of her, his hand resting on his gun as he faced Jordan, his voice firm and calm. "Step back," the officer commanded. "You're under arrest for harassment, stalking, and threats of violence. We've got enough evidence to charge you." Jordan froze, his fists dropping slowly to his sides. The words seemed to hit him, like a punch to the gut. His eyes flickered from the officer to Aisha, and for the briefest of moments, something in his gaze softened. But it was fleeting. The storm of rage behind his eyes had not abated. It had only been momentarily stilled by the presence of law enforcement. "You think this is over?" he spat, his voice still raw with anger. "You think you're safe? I will find you again. I will make you regret this." Aisha's heart didn't race. Her hands didn't tremble. She felt a strange calmness wash over her as she looked at him. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. Not his threats, not his manipulations. She was free, and nothing he said could change that. "You will never control me again," she said firmly, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken truths. The officers handcuffed him without another word, their movements swift and efficient. They led him away, his protests growing fainter as they reached the police car. Aisha stood in place, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths, her body finally able to relax in the aftermath of the storm. Tasha rushed over, her arms wide as she enveloped Aisha in a hug. The warmth and safety of her friend's embrace were all Aisha needed in that moment. She had made it. She had broken free. "I'm so proud of you, Aisha," Tasha whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You did it. You got out." Aisha pulled back, wiping the tears from her cheeks. She wasn't sure if they were tears of relief or sorrow, but they felt necessary, like the final release of everything she had been holding inside. The officer turned to Aisha, his face softening as he spoke. "You're safe now. You did the right thing. There's no going back now, but you don't have to." Aisha nodded, her mind finally clearing from a fog of fear and anxiety. For the first time in a long time, she felt like herself again, like the woman who deserved to live freely, without the weight of someone else's control hanging over her. The sirens blared as the squad car drove away, taking Jordan with it. It was over. The nightmare was over. Aisha was free, but that freedom came at a cost. She had learned a painful lesson about love, about what it truly meant to be loved, and what it meant to love herself. For far too long, Aisha had confused control with love. She had believed that the intensity, the obsession, was a sign of affection. But now, standing in the dim light of the alley with Tasha by her side, she understood the truth. Love should never feel like a prison. It should never feel like a cage. True love, the kind that builds you up, that frees you, doesn't come with manipulation, control, or threats. It doesn't demand obedience or silence. It doesn't take. It gives. It trusts. And Aisha had finally learned that she was worthy of that kind of love. She was worthy of freedom, of respect, and of peace. The story of Aisha's escape from Jordan's toxic, controlling love is a stark reminder of the difference between true love and obsession. True love never coerces or suffocates. It nurtures, respects boundaries, and empowers the other person to grow. If you find yourself in a relationship where love feels like a chain, it's time to walk away. No one has the right to control you. No one has the right to make you feel small or helpless. You are enough, just as you are. Don't settle for anything less than the love that gives you space to breathe and be your true self. If you've ever found yourself in a relationship where you felt trapped, or if you've been touched by Aisha's story in any way, please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Like this video if you believe in the power of self-love and freedom, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful, real-life stories like this. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it, because everyone deserves to know that they are worthy of healthy love, respect, and happiness. Stay strong. Stay free.